Yeah, Center for Disease Control. Yeah, I've heard of this dance going around like an awful disease. It's gonna have Greenwich Village just like that. Yeah. You don't care? You're at a party. Alright, never mind, I'll call you back. So much for that. But speaking of parties, 2025, we're coming up on 50 years of the Beach Boys Party album. And I thought, you know what better way to celebrate 50 years of Beach Boys Party than with a special two-part video looking not just at the album itself, but also as a celebration of 10 years of our two-disc Unplugged and Uncovered CD remix. We have quite a bit of stuff to cover for Party. Indeed, we can experience it in two very different ways. Please comment some of your favorite Beach Boys Party tracks below, and let's take a look at all the wonderful things we have with those Cokes and potato chips as we begin our deep dive into Beach Boys Party. Know what song all the Americans know, even the kids? Because I teach, so it's interesting. It's Barbara Ann.
Oh, Barbara Ann.
That's the one that, and then at that Surf City All-Stars show, I was with a companion who didn't know much about the Beach Boys, but that was the one he knew, and that was one he was excited to hear. And Al Jardine has famously said, I even saw him say this at a concert once, it was the dumbest thing the Beach Boys ever recorded. But yet, everybody loves Barbara Ann. So,
yeah, it's a smash.
But I was going to say that one, I'm sure people in Spain or anywhere else in the world
they'll know that for sure. Yeah, in fact, there were two girls today, two ladies who bought our album, and I said, you know the Beach Boys? Oh, yeah. And I said, we sang Barbara Ann at one of the little venues here, and I put it on the video, and they were going, oh, Barbara, it was great. And two ladies, I suppose, they're in there, I don't know what, late 60s, 70s probably, and they were really into it.
Beach Boys' Pet Sounds was still under construction in late 1965. Indeed, it would not be released till the spring of 1966. But something was needed for Christmas 1965. There had to be a Beach Boys album on the market. According to the booklet for the Beach Boys Party Stacko Tracks 2 CD, there was some kind of compromise where it wouldn't be an actual live album, but rather a live in-studio album, presented as being part of a Beach Boys party. What if you just walked in on the Beach Boys having a musical jam session with their friends and family, and what if you could somehow record that and take it home with you? That's what Beach Boys Party would be. If you bought it at your local record store, it might very well come with a bag of free Beach Boys potato chips. In that CD booklet, Brian Wilson writes a somewhat bizarre intro that's all over the place, talking about how it was recorded very quickly one night in June, how Jan and Dean showed up and weren't they such handsome guys, and how some of these songs I should say, were favorites of him in high school, and how he'd done them with friends and things like that. It feels to me like Brian probably wrote a lot more, and he just kind of edited it down to something that could fit on one page. I don't know, either that or Brian wasn't in the right headspace at the time. But nonetheless, there's a lot of praise heaped upon Beach Boys Party. It's kind of one of the most unique and distinct records the group ever made, and it's sort of one of a kind. Other artists, of course, have copied the sort of fake, impromptu party approach, but for a live in-studio album with minimal instrumentation that's predominantly covers of other people's songs, Party is a far cry from their previous work like Today and Summer Days and Summer Nights. Let's take a look at the track list of Party and see what all we got there. Side 1, we start off with the Olympics Hully Gully. That's pretty cool. Get a couple of Beatles covers in there, I Should Have Known Better and Tell Me Why. We get the Rivingtons, Papa Oom Mau Mau. Papa Oom Mau Mau, of course, was part of their live set. Oops, wrong cassette. If you had bought Beach Boys concert the previous year, then you might very well have heard the Beach Boys do that before, but not in a studio, or at least semi-studio setting. That's pretty cool. We have Mountain of Love, originally by Harold Dorman, but made famous by Johnny Rivers. Another Beatles one with You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. And the Everly Brothers, Devoted to You. And that takes care of side 1. The captions note, For Hully Gully, Mike sings lead. For I Should Have Known Better, Carl and Al are in there somewhere. For Papa Ooh Mau Mau, soprano is Brian and alto is Mike. For Mountain of Love, lead Mike. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, it just says Dennis. It doesn't even say lead or anything else. Just, hey, think of that song, you think of John Lennon, or you think of Dennis. And Devoted to You, Brian and Mike are the Cleverly Brothers. Oh, wow. So definitely off to a good start there, I would say. Notice the cool photo gatefold. I believe later reissues from like the 80s and so would remove that and kind of just keep it with this fun cover and fun back cover. And if you flip the record over, Alley Oop, lead by Mike. There Is No Other Like My Baby, a salute to Phil Spector, but no caption listed there. Alley Oop have been covered by several artists, including the Dinosaurs and the studio group, the Hollywood Argyles. Medley, I Get Around, Little Deuce Coupe. Coupe is misspelled without the E. This one being the Beach Boys doing a spoof of their own work. It's hard to believe that even this early in their career, they were already going back and reinterpreting and reimagining their earlier songs for a completely different type of release. Who says Disco Here Comes the Night was the first time the Beach Boys reimagined their earlier work? I don't know. The caption for that reading, ha, ho, he. Very clever. The Times They Are A-Changin' by Bob Dylan. The caption mentions Al, a man with a message. And last but not least, Barbara Ann, which gets no real caption or credit or anything like that. Maybe because Dean Torrance had sung on that, along with Brian. And lastly, all performance rights are BMI, except The Times They Are A-Changin', which is ASCAP. There you go. Just so you know who owns what. We've talked about some of the weird Beach Boys legal disclaimers when we went over Best of the Beach Boys Volume 3, so you know it's coming. In terms of singles and kind of individual releases, Party is very much a concept album. Everything kind of fits together in that context. Stripped down, minimal instrumentation, a lot of gags, a lot of silliness. So you wouldn't really find too many of these songs floating around. But a big single for 1965, indeed a number 2 chart peak single, Ba Ba Ba, Ba Barbara Ann. Apparently Barbara Ann was never intended to be a single, but the failure of, or maybe not failure, but certainly underperformance of the big song that was being groomed as the Beach Boys hit for that particular quarter, The Little Girl I Once Knew. The Little Girl I Once Knew underperformed, only reached about number 20. Didn't really seem to strike a chord with everybody quite as much, so Barbara Ann was rushed in as something of a replacement, as apparently disc jockeys would play the last bit of this album, the Barbara Ann finale, as, you know, just kind of regular radio airplay, and the single simply cuts off all the kind of extraneous things at the end. The joke Barbara Ann's, you got me rockin', you got me rollin', oh Barbara Ann, and getting all goofy with it and crazy. They kind of snipped those off and made a single, and indeed most greatest hits packages, most compilations, things of that nature are going to include this shorter single edit. Interestingly, the CD version of Beach Boys Party, again, pair of Pistachio tracks, opts not to include this. It only includes the original album take. Indeed, all of the bonus tracks are stacco tracks, instrumentals. Stacco tracks doesn't sound quite right. But they're all instrumentals, so Beach Boys Party stuff was mostly left in the can and really not used to any great deal. We'll talk later in the video about some of the things that popped up kind of here and there. But pretty interesting to think that a big single, Barbara Ann, is often distanced from the album it's sourced from, as this was a re-edit. For the B-side, instead of using another party track, we got Girl Don't Tell Me. That was from the Summer Days and Summer Nights record. So, very good song there. As far as I know, as a B-side, it didn't chart, and Girl Don't Tell Me tends to be one that, although Beach Boys fans like it, and it does pop up on a lot of hits packages, it doesn't really seem to have a huge presence in their catalog. If you like the album version of Barbara Ann with the extended outro and all the goofiness, you can find on a few compilations. Some copies of 20 Golden Greats use it, as does 1970's Good Vibrations, which uses it as a closer to the album and keeps all of that Barbara Ann, silliness on account of it being the last track here, as well as here. Pretty cool stuff. But Barbara Ann is the main reason Party is remembered, probably the thing that got it recognized the most, but we do see a few other songs from it pop up as singles here and there. The B-side to The Little Girl I Once Knew is actually another Party track. There is No Other Like My Baby. Again, a Phil Spector tribute. The Crystals had had a huge success with it. And Devoted to You from the Everly Brothers uses the B-side to the Brian and Mike single Gettin' Hungry. Gettin' Hungry has its own kind of weird release. Gettin' Hungry, of course, was a studio track on Smiley Smile. Had nothing to do with the Smile sessions proper. It's kind of its own animal. And Brian and Mike, for some reason, got full credit for that single, as well as the Devoted to You B-side. So you can find Party tracks elsewhere. They're on a lot of compilations and things like that too. But Party is, again, very unique and very much its own animal. Let's take a look now at what happens when we decide to unplug Party for its 50th anniversary, shall we?
If any fan is a little unclear about what unplugged means, I didn't use any electric instruments at all. There was no electric guitars, there was no synthesizers, no drum machine, nothing processed like that at all. It was all acoustic instruments.
Okay, so that clip was David Logeman talking about the upcoming Beach Boys Unplugged project for 2026, but nonetheless, his description fits Party Uncovered and Unplugged pretty well. Well, mostly anyway. Party Uncovered and Unplugged takes the Party album and removes all of those overdubs. Extra background noise and chatter and some of the silly bits are all cut out, and we're left with the songs themselves. This was a really nice 2 CD set. It features some great liner notes. Firstly from Alan Boyd, who notes that some tapes were lost or recorded over. Certain songs like If I Had a Hammer and Roll Over Beethoven were apparently considered, but maybe either not recorded or those recordings were again erased or destroyed. Doesn't seem like anything was really done with those. And Craig Solinsky writes a very nice and very lengthy write-up all about the album and its conception and its production. Highly recommend that. This was released in LP form, but it was only the original tracks from the Party album with those new sort of remixes, or as I've called them in the past, down mixes. Special thanks, by the way, to Jamie Brewster and Steve Lewis, who also appear in this video in stock footage, but I've referred to them as down mixes before because I guess basically that's what they are, trying to make it more musical and more organic and less sort of a party novelty item. Mark Lennon, of course, who often works with Alan Boyd, also wrote his section of the liner notes, did a very nice job on that. And we get a very detailed track list and credit list. This was a lot of fun to get back in 2015, and even though I was unable to get the vinyl, and the price markup for the vinyl is huge by the way, I was really happy to have this, and I found a lot of really cool tracks to look at and to listen to better explore and dig into Beach Boys Party. So what do you say we go through each CD? We'll do one today, and then one again next week for the anniversary, and I think we'll have a good time with it. Please comment your favorite Beach Boys Party tracks below. Let's take a deep dive into Beach Boys Party Uncovered and Unplugged. Yeah, in terms of party outtakes, we've only ever had Ruby Baby from the Good Vibrations box set, and a couple like sessions and little things here and there. It's interesting to think, you might remember, friends, if you watched our last video, Steve and I left off on Hawthorne, California, which was the first time they tried to remix the party tunes without the overdubs to kind of make them more, make them more organic, that sort of thing. We only get two. We get Devoted to You and Barbara Ann, and then they kind of did a highlight reel of some of the sessions and chatter that go with it, that kind of thing. But nothing of great substance. But like the Party 2 for CD, there's nothing from Party. It's all from Stacko tracks. So, you know, it was so exciting to actually see all these things that we had never heard before. And I honestly, and I've said this about Party before, the best stuff they recorded, they didn't use. I don't know, Steve, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd go quite that far, but there's certainly a lot of great stuff. I mean, they could have made it a double album if they'd wanted to.
Oh, that's true.
I don't think it was necessary, certainly. And I'm putting together actually for my channel a deep dive into Party, a two-parter. And this has been really useful just for research because it's so well documented and the discussion that goes on around the tracks. You feel like you're hearing the real Party that went on that was then overdubbed with the phony Party to make it sound like it did for the album.
Let's take a deep dive look at disc 1 of that Party Uncovered and Unplugged set, shall we? So we start off with the full album in its unplugged form. Again, this would be one that if you bought the vinyl, you would have it on LP form. Sadly, I can't afford one of those, so we have the full unplugged version on CD. Remember, of course, too, a couple of those tracks we can find elsewhere. Devoted to You and Barbara Ann in unplugged form on Hawthorne, California from 2001. Devoted to You being remixed again for the 60th anniversary Sounds of Summer. Indeed, the artwork for the album specifically states it is the Party Unplugged mix remixed again. And There Is No Other Like My Baby being one of the things we saw on Made in California. Remember, Made in California does not include the unplugged Barbara Ann, but rather a 50th anniversary remix of the single. I should say Beach Boys' 50th anniversary, not the Party album. But all the Party tracks are there in their unplugged, sort of remixed or downmixed form. Then we get the Let's Get This Party Rolling sessions, recorded September the 8th, 1965. These were also used on Made in California as part of the intro for the couple party tracks that they had there. Things are a little bit different here, though. They remove a few things, like the reference to marijuana is taken out, that sort of thing. Indeed, Made in California, the version only runs about 1 minute and 13 seconds versus almost 2 minutes on this CD. That kind of thing. The references to magic fingers and vibrators are removed as well. Probably all for the better. I'm assuming they mean massage equipment, but I guess you never know. But both versions still keep the sort of silly intro. Hi, this is Al Jardine. This is what happens at a typical Beach Boys party. Of course, a joke from the Cassius Love versus Sonny Wilson track of Shutdown Volume 2. So if you're looking for a more organic, complete tape, you would of course want the Party Uncovered and Unplugged CD versus a slightly edited, toned down version from Made in California. Of course, there's a line in there I've used in several of my videos with Steve Lewis. Steve, you brought the records! That would be a reference to Steve Korthoff, who was playing some background percussion for the group. He was, of course, also involved in their management, especially with their tours and things like that. If you're a fan of the Friends album, you might remember the line from Be Here in the Morning, no calls from Korthoff, Parks or Grillo, that sort of thing. So nice to see him get a shout out here, though. Then we jump into the music itself. I Should Have Known Better. We have a very early rehearsal of that. This was recorded on August the 23rd, 1965, along with the next several tracks there. We have an early take of the Drifters' Ruby Baby. Ruby, 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 will you be mine? This is just kind of an early rehearsal of it. We have a good take of the Rolling Stones' I Can't Get No Satisfaction. The group ultimately didn't use this, which is a shame because even this early, take one kind of rehearsal bit is actually quite good. It probably could have made the album. After that, we have an early take of the Olympics' Hully Gully, which would of course be the opener for the final album. It's a decent take, but again, it's just kind of a rehearsal thing. It's a rough kind of practice take. You can see what they were trying to do, and Hully Gully's a song they end up playing more for laughs than anything else. We have one of my favorites from the entire Party Uncovered and Unplugged set, their cover of Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind, which Al Jardine sings. Peter, Paul, and Mary had a huge hit with it around the same time. Of course, Bob Dylan did it originally. Al Jardine absolutely nails it. It feels a lot more ambitious and a lot more serious than most of the other things we expect from Party, but unlike the Times They Are A-Changin', where I feel like it doesn't quite fit because it's trying to be more serious, I think Blowin' in the Wind would have worked really well to add some gravitas to it. Interestingly, though, they don't do the full song. They omit the last verse. This must have been something they were considering only slightly, that maybe they were going, okay, let's give it a try and, kind of see what we have. Doesn't feel like Al was given a chance to really and truly do a good cover of Blowin' in the Wind. We have a little bit of dialogue about the sun rays. They're actually really supportive of the sun rays too. The sun rays are often kind of the butt of the joke if you watch like Love and Mercy or An American Family, one of those Beach Boys biographical films. The sun rays are usually used as like, oh geez, this is what we could have been if we hadn't decided to advance as musicians. The Sun Rays, of course, had some hits like Andrea and I Live for the Sun, and songs like that. Indeed, Won't You Tell Me was something the Sun Rays had worked on and the Beach Boys had worked on as well. Brian Wilson and Rick Henn of the group actually kind of sharing a co-writing credit on that. Pretty cool stuff. But here, they're actually very supportive of the Sun Rays and note that, oh, I'm very happy for them. I hope they're successful. And then it kind of devolves into this weird discussion of this girl that several of them had met at a party, and she was very nice but very shy, and she was putting Terry Melcher, on and that kind of thing. It feels a little bit more random maybe than it should. I think if they called it, you know, Bruce and Terry and a girl instead of calling it the Sun Rays, it might have been a little more accurate. And that actually finishes kind of the first segment there, session 1, again, August 23rd, 1965. We move into session number 2 from September the 8th, 1965. Starting off there with a take of Ruby Baby. This is the same take of Ruby Baby that is used on 1993's Good Vibrations box set. This is the one where Ruby, 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 will you be mine? Oink, 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 oink. And they start doing sort of these farm animal sounds, things like that are a little bit distracting and probably show they weren't going to take the song super seriously. This is, you know, a slightly different edit of it, but it's the same basic recording. If you have that box set, you've certainly heard that before. There's a really quick take called The Masked Phantom, which is sort of a goofy little session there where they play a few riffs and just kind of set up another song. Doesn't seem like much was going to come out of that. Another take of Holly Golly, this one being especially silly as it deals with Carl eating peanut butter from a great big jar. Peanut butter, and completely rewriting the lyrics to make fun of Carl's weight. Don't know that it would have made the album. Feels more just like a fun jam session thing, and I'm sure Carl was a good sport about the whole thing, but probably not something they would have kept for the actual record itself. There's some dialogue there about Carl, go get your bass. This is where they read like party direction, but they do it in the most scripted, you know, planned form. Hey, plug it in there. Go get your instruments. And there's a few bits of wordplay in there too. Carl's bass is downstairs, so it's in the basement, that kind of thing. Some dad jokes and just some kind of meta silliness about the whole thing. I'm okay with that though. We have a good take of Holly Golly take 3, definitely getting more where we will be when we get to the actual finished recording. There's a pretty good take of I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Again, only their second try, but they do a really good job on it. I kind of wish that they'd kept I Can't Get No Satisfaction for the actual finished release. There's a little rehearsal, kind of a silly bit called That's a Bad Guitar. Doesn't really seem like there's a whole lot going on there. Then we get a more normal take of Ruby Baby, be their take 3. That's kind of more organized and more planned. That kind of thing. There's some stuff about what's the matter, Carl? This little bit of banter is all about trading guitars and swapping instruments and who should play what. Again, just some banter, nothing particularly interesting there. A fourth take of Ruby Baby, which starts normally and seriously and then devolves into just complete shouting chaos by the end. Really not, again, anything that would have been useful for a finished album unless they wanted, I guess, to have a song that started normal and then devolved into insanity. Carl's tires. Carl, during a bit of kind of studio chatter, mentions, oh, my tires, and there's some jokes about, oh, Carl's got a flat tire. I don't know if he meant to say my fingers. It's kind of what it seems like the plan was, or maybe meant to say I'm tired, but that doesn't seem to fit the context of it. But just a little kind of comedy bit. Nothing too interesting there. A couple takes of the Beatles' I Should Have Known Better. The group does the number 2 take, which is just sort of like a rough rehearsal, and then the number 3 take, which is a little bit better, a little more accurate, a little more filled out, closer to what we get to the actual album. But indeed, they were doing several practice takes there. There's a real quick bit about "Wasn't that great, folks?" is what the dialogue track is called. But here they talk about smoking cigarettes. They say, "Oh wait, we can't talk about smoking cigarettes. Oh wait, we have candy cigarettes." And that's kind of a little, I guess, nod to what they could and couldn't say on an album geared for teenagers. We have an early take of "Tell Me Why." Again, another one of those Beatles tracks there. Kind of a short take, just like an early practice, early setup. We have "Don't Worry Baby." So, "Don't Worry Baby." When this set was first announced back in 2015, all we had was a track list. No timestamps, nothing like that. Just here's what's going to be on there. There were two I was super excited for. "Don't Worry Baby" and "California Girls." "California Girls" to get to here in a little bit. But "Don't Worry Baby," I was thinking, oh wow, wouldn't it be so cool if we had an acoustic version of that? Just, and the group kind of doing a stripped down, fun approach. Like, there's a lot they could do with that. But sadly, "Don't Worry Baby" is really just a short riff. They actually do a few spoofs of Sonny and Cher's "I Got You Babe," and there's a little bit of "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away." Not "I Should Have Known Better." It's a little bit of "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away" in there too. But just a real quick guitar riff, really nothing of great substance. If you're expecting a proper stripped down, unplugged "Don't Worry Baby," you're not going to find it here. Then we have a proper take of "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away," which is mostly instrumental, but the group does a few kind of silly of their fake opera harmonies and goofing around, things like that. I should have, I keep wanting to call it that. "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away," pardon me, that became part of their live set. It was Dennis's song for a time in like 1966 or so, and the group seems to do it mostly seriously, barring the backing vocals that go, "Hey, you've got to hide your love away." Some of that kind of silliness there. But here it feels like they're trying to figure out exactly how they're going to arrange this song, who's going to do what, how they're going to set it up. Is it going to be silly or serious? And it kind of shows, I think, in some of these recordings that this was one maybe they weren't quite sure how they were going to do it. We have a Little Deuce Coupe take. Now, Little Deuce Coupe, of course, is used along with "I Get Around" as part of a comedy medley, kind of spoof bit in this album. But here it seems like anyway, they were going to do Little Deuce Coupe in its entirety, and at least do it mostly seriously. But ultimately, this must have been something they scrapped pretty early. It has a silly intro, and they play around a little bit with it. Then they actually play Little Deuce Coupe, and they just kind of stop, and it gets all goofy at the end. So maybe this was something they were thinking about, and they weren't really sure, do we want to do a proper version of Little Deuce Coupe or not? I don't know. And they just kind of let it be at that. They kind of saved it for the comedy medley and didn't really want to do a proper version of it. And then we have one of my favorites, "California Girls," this time being done as a mostly serious, unplugged arrangement with all the party trimmings, that kind of thing. They have a bit where they're trying to play the intro, and someone, I think it's Brian, says, no, we cut the intro, go straight into the song, and they do an acoustic version of "California Girls," which is actually really good, and I think would have worked well on the finished album. It has some silliness, but not enough to actually detract from the song itself. Pretty cool stuff.